Vandals in Tunisia and these other areas of North Africa, the breadbasket, former breadbasket of the Roman Empire, they would have found out that the Vandals, the Undals, as they rephrased it, came from the direction of Spain. So in time, Al-Andalus became associated with Spain in their mind, and the name for Islamic Spain was Al-Andalus, as it's come into English through Spanish, Andalusia. So you see that you do have these kind of interesting side effects of the Muslim presence right from the beginning, even in the name, the classical name for Muslim Spain, and one of the most romantic names because of the music associated with it, I think, in the English vocabulary. Andalusia evokes tremendously romantic ideas of poetry and music and fabled nights in gardens where fountains flow, I think, and lovely guitar music also. In any event, the next group were the Visigoths. They were directed into Spain by the Romans, and they were not Christian at this point. Ultimately, in the late 400s and 500s, they were Christianized. And as all new converts to a certain faith, they often were more zealous than the people who converted them. So they were extremely zealous Christians in the early 600s, and along with their zeal came a good deal of intolerance. This intolerance was later to reassert itself when Spain, 900 years later, was reconquered in the process that I will tell you about called the Reconquista. And when Spain 900 years later was reconquered, the intolerant zeal of the Visigoths, who had just been converted to Christianity in the early 600s, moved into what we presently know as the Inquisition and the ultimate expulsion of both Jews and Arabs from Muslim, now in the late 1400s, at the time of Columbus's voyage, Christian Spain. So we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about this Visigoth experience then in Spain. This intolerance, where there were actually laws passed against minorities and non-Christian groups, and which made it almost difficult or impossible for them, very difficult or almost impossible to function in the society, created a lot of dissatisfaction, discontent, and so on. This paved the way for the eruption of the Muslim armies into Spain. And when the Muslim armies finally did come into Spain, the eruption was seen in terms of almost a Jewish-Muslim collaboration. For the Christian side, the Jews, to a certain extent, because of the situation they were in the 600s, had connived at the Muslim occupation, success, and presence in Spain. And in fact, the Jews certainly thrived under the Muslim occupation and presence in Spain. And that is contrary to what most people would think, because of the present day, people think that the Jews and the Muslims have some hostility or antagonism with each other. That was not the case in the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, as it turned out, medieval Islam was far more tolerant than the kind of Christianity that I've just outlined that was adopted by the Visigoths prior to the Muslim conquest in the 600s. Let me quickly trace where the Muslims came from so we can see how they got to Spain, and that will bring us to some of the cultural things that we need to look at in order to understand how the revival of learning affected the atmosphere for the final fruition that you are all studying in this course. The Muslims, as you know, began in Mecca in the early 600s. Muhammad's mission is 612 beginning, 622 is his flight from Mecca to Medina that marks the beginning of the Islamic community. Muhammad's death is 632. In the 630s and 40s, the Muslim armies, following his death, move up into Palestine, Syria, Egypt, Iraq, Iran, Persia, and so on. At the same time, a caliphate is formed. A caliphate is the word in Arabic for Khalifa, means successor. Caliph is the English word that approximates Khalifa. The caliphate are the successors to the prophet. Originally, there were some religious companions of Muhammad who were the caliphs from 632 to the 660 period. But at that point, owing to some internecine warfare within the Islamic community itself, the former aristocracy of Mecca reasserted itself and took over what was called their caliphate, and that was switched to Damascus. That was known as the Umayyad Caliphate. Now, the Umayyad Caliphate was formerly, and this is very important to try to keep in your mind because for Spanish history it's tremendously important. I know these names might sound a bit abstruse to you, but it's extremely important to try to fix that name in your mind because it's under the Umayyads in Spain that we get the flowering of Spanish Arab culture. And it's important to understand how you got Umayyads in Spain. So originally, this was the cultural and religious aristocracy of the city of Mecca where the Prophet came. Then in various struggles from 661 onwards, it reasserted itself and it moved the center of the Islamic Empire to Damascus in Syria, which now became known as the Umayyad Caliphate. Under this Umayyad Caliphate, the Arab conquering armies really took off. Armies moved eastward as far as India by 710. Armies moved westward with reverses, but still westward, fighting Berbers and others. That's where they came upon these Andals, these Vandals, these Andals, from whom they took the name Al-Andalus from. These armies moved across North Africa, and by 680 they had reached Morocco. You know, Morocco is a word that we get from the medieval usage, Moor. You know, Arabs were always called Moors. And we also have the name of the country next to Morocco, Mauritania. These names have remained. In fact, I think that the Moors are not quite what we would call Arabs. The Moors are really more native Berber people, but in time, as Arab civilization washed across North Africa and the Arab language with it, all began to be looked upon as quasi-Arabs, although I think there are still some differences from native Moors, Mauritania, Berbers, and what you would call Arabs from the Arabian Peninsula proper and other of the satellite areas spinning out from the Arabian Peninsula. In any event, by 680 the Arabs were in all the way across North Africa. In 710, after some dislocations in the Umayyad Caliphate itself, and things were restored to a certain harmony there, the decision was made by the Muslim governor of North Africa, his name was Musa ibn Nusayr, to send the Arab armies across the Straits of Gibraltar into Spain. You know the name of that governor? The governor's assistants who led the Arab armies into Spain?